Welcome everyone to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight is the Analects. We'll be covering Book 5, chapters 26, 27, and 28. Depending on the translation that you'll be using, it could be 25, 26, 27. As always, I'll ask for volunteers to go ahead and read the verses of their favorite translation. Generally speaking, it's James or Penny has. Yes, thank you. Penny, would you be gracious enough to go ahead and read your translation? You're muted.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, no problem.
I think this is verse 25 then. The master said, fine words, an insinuating appearance, and excessive respect.
You did that last week, is that right?
Yes, I think we did do that last week.
Okay.
So your translation would be 26, start on 26.
26.
Would it be 26 and 27?
Yeah, Yan Yuan and the Ji Lu. Okay, that's the beginning.
Yeah. So it would be 25.
Okay. We'll try again.
Sure. Do you want me actually to do the introduction again, so that do you
If
mind?
you want.
Okay. Yeah, that might work out better. Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight is the Analects. We'll be covering Book 5, chapters 26, 27, and 28. Penny, would you go ahead and do the honors? And
Yes.
Thank
Thank you. Chapter 25. Yen Wan and Qi Lu being by his side, the master said to them, come, let each of you tell his wishes. Shu Lu said, I should like, having chariots and horses and light fur dresses, to share them with my friends, and though they should spoil them, I would not be displeased. Yen Wan said, I should like not to boast of my excellence, nor to make a display of my meritorious deeds. Su Lu then said, I should like, sir, to hear your wishes. The master said, they are, in regard to the aged, to give them rest, in regard to friends, to show them sincerity, in regard to the young, to treat them tenderly. Verse 26. The master said, it is all over. I have not yet seen one who could perceive his faults and inwardly accuse himself. Verse 27. The master said, in a hamlet of 10 families, there may be found one honorable and sincere as I am, but not so fond of learning.
Thank you very much, Penny. Would anybody else like to read their favorite translation of the Analects? Oh, please, Aman.
I will go ahead and read from the DC Lao because it just doesn't feel right if we don't have two.
I agree.
Book 5, verse 26. Yan Yuan and Ji Lu were in attendance. The master said, I suggest you each tell me what it is you have set your hearts on. Zu Lu said, I should like to share my carriage and horses, clothes and furs with my friends, and to have no regrets even if they become worn. Yan Yuan said, I should like never to boast of my own goodness and never to impose onerous tasks upon others. Zu Lu said, I should like to hear what you have set your heart on. The master said, to bring peace to the old, to have trust in my friends, and to cherish the young. Verse 27, the master said, I suppose I should give up hope. I have yet to meet the man who, on seeing his own errors, is able to take himself to task inwardly. 28, the master said, in a hamlet of 10 households, there are bound to be those who are my equal in doing their best for others and being trustworthy in what they say, but they are unlikely to be as eager to learn as I am.
Thank you so much, Amon. Jason, would you like to go ahead and share your translation?
Yeah, okay. 28. Yan Yuan, here's the, I think that here's the first time the Confucius best student, Yan Yuan or Yan Hui, sometimes he call Hui or Yan Yuan. Okay, I think that's the first time he spoke, I think. And then the person they call Ji Lu or Zi Lu, they are the same person. The person Confucius said, when I go immigrate to other state, you shall come with me. That's the person, the bravery person. Okay, so that's the conversation when these three people, Yan Yuan, Zi Lu, and the Confucius sit together. That's their conversation. Yan Yuan and Ji Lu were attending Confucius. The master said, why don't each of you talk about your aspirations? Zi Lu, okay, the bravery person, okay, he is, Confucius will travel with him to overseas. Zi Lu said, I would like to have my wagons, horses, and the light fur coats to share with my friends. And if they damage them, not to regret. Yan Yuan said, I will wish not to boast my excellence, nor cause others labor. Zi Lu said, we would like to know what master's aspiration is. The master said, I would like to comfort the old, trust my friends, and care for the youth. So here is, we can read in this one, a 3 level, right? Zi Lu, he is talking, when they talk about aspiration, what motivates you, okay, in your life, I think that's what they mean, aspiration. So Zi Lu is talking about the stuff, right? Talking about the horses, the fur coat, the clothes. He talk about the stuff. Yan Yuan, as the Confucius best student, he has a little bit higher level. He talk about the person, okay, himself. He doesn't want to boast himself, and he doesn't want to cause other people's problem. Okay, so that's his idea. And the Confucius, as a master, he care about his inspiration is the people in the society. So he talk about the old people, the friend, and the young people. Okay, so I think that's talk about the 3 people, talk about their aspiration in 3 different layers, if you want to talk. 527. This one is Confucius, probably during Confucius in a difficult time. So Confucius said, the master said, it's all over. Okay, so he sighed. Okay, I have never seen anyone who can see his own faults and bring charges against himself within. So here Confucius like to use the word, I have never seen anyone and do something, as I think it's a rhetorical word. I made a count. He speak this kind of one 5 times. Okay, so every time he's talking about something good, he will say something you should do. He will say, I have never seen anyone can do this. Okay, actually, he talk about this virtue. You can see your own faults and bring charges against yourself. Okay, actually, Zi Lu is this kind of person, because it mentions talking about Zi Lu is the person who knows he has some fault. He will be happy because he has something to do. to fix his own problem. So that's the Confucius way to tell people, I have never seen someone can do this. That means, something good you should do. Chapter 28. The master said, in a town of 10 households, okay, he is talking about small neighborhood. Okay, there must be someone who is devoted to work and trustworthy to people like me. So that's the two words Confucius like to use, 忠信. I think we talked about last week. 忠 means loyal, okay, but in here means devoted to the work. And together with trustworthy, that means you keep your word to your friend, the people. So here he talk about things. You are good in your work and also good to people. So he said that in a small neighborhood, they must have the people like me, okay, devoted to his work and trustworthy to his people. But Confucius is kind of proud that he's different. So he said there will be none who is eager to learn like me. Okay, so remember, Confucius only talk about 3 people eager to learn. One is Wenzi, okay, the person who died, he got the name as Wen, okay, so that's the person. And another person is himself, and another one is Yan Hui, and the whole analog. Confucius only talk about these 3 people, including himself, is eager to learn. And I don't think eager to learn is like today's understanding as gaining more knowledge. He's talking about same as the previous one, to improve yourself. If you have a problem, you have some fault, you fix it and you keep improving yourself. Self-cultivation. That's what he meant. Yeah. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Jason. Aman, would you like to comment? Welcome, Jenny.
Of course.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I enjoy this section. I think it's a nice series of snapshots, both of Confucius' own personality and of Yin Hui and Zulu, 2 of his most standout excuse me, students. I absolutely agree with Jason. There's sort of a progression of desire or ambition or aspiration in 26, where you go from the meeting of physical needs to the meeting of your emotional needs, almost to a complete sort of social awareness. I find it really interesting when Confucius says to comfort the old, that there's an implication of material good there. So he pulls in some of Zulu's aspiration. Trust my friends. That's an emotional state. That's something you feel. And care for the youth is a combination of both. It's something that requires both physical means and emotional means to do. And so, excuse me, I think what you see in 26 is not just that progression, but a final synthesis of it to demonstrate that all of them have the right qualities. But here we're seeing how those qualities can be brought eloquently and simply into concise aspirations or desires. In 27, I agree, there's always this rhetorical turn of I've never seen one yet. And as a instructor, I find that fascinating. It almost is an appeal to the most juvenile impulses of the student. Nobody's ever completed this quiz in 5 minutes. Oh, well, let me tackle it. I'll show you I can do it. It's a gauntlet thrown down as a challenge for students to, rise up and be the first to wow me with their ability to do something I've never seen anyone do before. maybe one of the oldest versions of teacher, good cop, bad cop. Excuse me. And in 28, I think it's fairly self-explanatory. I do think that the idea of being eager to learn goes all the way back to book 1, where book 1 or 2, where he says the most important thing is that a person devote themselves wholly to others, that they cultivate a quality of shao, filial piety, and of that sort of emotional responsibility. And if you have any energy after that, then study. And here, I think we see that study doesn't just mean sit down and read a book, though that is a point of self-reflection or a way of doing self-reflection. It's eager to learn, eager to study, eager to find the faults in my own character so that I can work on them, fix them, correct them. I think Confucius' way of saying it would be to rectify them and correct them. You see your own flaws and polish them right out of your being. He truly believed that was something that could be done. It is also a sort of rhetorical twist. I've never seen no one's as eager as me. But I think it's also, in many ways, a very clever way of synthesizing all the lessons into here's what was important to begin with, and here's how you go about building upon it.
Thank you very much, Aman and Jason. I do have some follow-up questions, but I would like to hear from everyone else. Go ahead and type exclamation point in the chat if you would like to comment on any of these verses. James.
Sorry. Yeah, I really enjoyed the translations from Ammon and especially and Jason's as well. I think and Jason's comments. They clarified, that the translation. I had some issues with the words in the Legge translation of 26, but that was more or less satisfied by the other translations. And the number 27 is about, to me, it's about something very important, which is introspection. We have to have the gift of introspection. We have to be able to, first of all, perceive our faults. But what would be like even 10 times better, perhaps, would be to have the ability to accuse oneself, which is what Heidegger called being guilty. If we have the possibility of heeding the call of guilt, this is profoundly more powerful than merely being introspective, looking at our good side, our bad side, trying to be objective about ourselves. But there is another level. There's the ability to accuse oneself. And that's why he says, I've never yet seen one who could both perceive his own faults and also accuse oneself. Or I think Jason's translation was more to the point. Could you read your verse again, Jason, for 27?
27. Okay.
Yes, please.
So here, Master said, it's all over. I have never seen anyone who can see his own faults and bring charges against himself within.
Exactly.
Yes, that is
Go ahead.
one thing I find out a lot of translation may not catch up, is the first three characters. Okay, Confucius used the word, the Chinese, yi, who, that means a sigh. He feel kind of disappointed, feel like no hope. So kind of like, it's all over. so he kind of give up. So that's his tone. I hope I catch up this tone.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And so that this is really profound. This is the whole thing. Can we need to be introspective. We need to look at ourselves, like as we are, and judge ourselves. But who can actually accuse themselves? Who can charge themselves? And so kind of like actually has the fortitude to do that. And then the last one, the 28, I don't quite get that, because it's partly because of the American education system and what it might have been like in a Chinese hamlet in Confucius's time. But I'm kind of he thinks people are full of virtue, but they don't quite I think he respects other people. Yeah, he's saying, I respect other people for their virtues, but they're not quite as interested in learning as I am. And of course, I'm traveling in austere communities, so that's why I don't get it. I don't quite get. They're not as eager. No one who is eager to learn as I am. So that, but it's a small community that he's talking about. So I could use some clarification on that. Doesn't quite make sense to me.
Okay, so let me interrupt here. So
Please.
I think that probably okay, if James doesn't get it, that means my translation doesn't work well. So okay. So
Well, I'm working off leges. You can repeat your translation
Yeah.
if you don't
well,
mind.
actually, I use James as an audience, So okay, so I think probably let me repeat one more time. The master said he's talking about he's talking about it's not that difficult to be as good as I am. Okay, let's say assume I'm the good. Let's say in the class I'm the good student. Okay, it's not that bad. It's not that difficult to have a small class have people as smart as I am, but but not everybody as hardworking as I am. Okay, so let's put it this way. So he's talking about the devoting to his work. Keep your words to the people. That's on the surface, right? Everybody can see. Okay, this guy is devoting to his work. This guy is always keep his word. Okay, so it's not that difficult to reach this standard. But as me, Confucius, okay, I'm different. I'm not just like this. The surface you see. I keep improving myself, which he said, eager to learn. Okay. So I think that's his tone, right, on this one. So the focus is not showing off. The focus is not criticize other people. The focus is shift the focus is on the eager to learn. Okay, so that's the key word. Okay, I hope I make it clear, and I hope it makes sense. Sorry.
Thank you.
Lamont,
Yeah, I
go
thought that
ahead,
was great.
then we'll come back to Quan. Just I'm going to let him
I
on.
I don't want to interrupt. I just did want to add, I think I don't think there's anything wrong with the translation because it's fairly consistent across. I think the problem is understanding what exactly he means. And I think you were tapping on it pretty well. In a small hamlet, it's easy to find a person with a good reputation, a good character. And anywhere you go, you'll find somebody who probably has those things, and maybe deservedly so. But in that same small community, everyone will say, oh yeah, he's a great guy. Oh, this is a great person. And on hearing that constant reassurance and constant praise, who's going to re-examine themselves to say, well, but I've got all these faults I really need to work on. Most people in place and time then would see that as a contented huge win, that my reputation puts me at the height of respect in my community, job done. I can wash my hands of it. Whereas Confucius is saying, I may have that reputation. That's not good enough for me. I need to improve myself for myself because I know myself to have these flaws that don't necessarily stand out with the community, but it's because I've examined myself as thoroughly as I have. I think that's one of the crucial elements that's missing, is that if you just get positive feedback, it's very difficult to see a reason to change your behavior, which is why that earlier verse, to bring charges against oneself, kind of intimates that. The idea that, oh, you may be great, but are you really? And couldn't you really take yourself to task for some of these lesser qualities?
Thank you, Aman. There's been some fantastic points really made by everyone thus far. And I want to let Juan speak, but I do want to come back to something that you talked about, the ability to objectively, James, is the ability to objectively evaluate yourself. And you had mentioned how it's this guilt that allows you to transform yourself, to see exactly what your faults are and how challenging that actually is. That is an incredibly difficult thing to do, to be able to look at reality and see yourself for what you actually are. And I can understand where Confucius would actually say, I've never met a man that has actually been able to look at himself objectively and then rectify the problems that he has. It's interesting, and how you compared that to Heidegger was very, very interesting. I would like to revisit that theme in particular, because that's something that personally I find I struggle with, and most people struggle with, is how to really objectively look at yourself in the world. But anyway, Quan, thank you for your patience.
Oh, not at all. What is exciting in those three sections for me is, I would say that it put a lot of flesh on the epistemological journey that we have a summary at the chapter 2 of book 2, section 6, when Confucius was talking of at 15, at 30, at 40, at 50, at 60, at 70. I'm not going to bother you with repeating that chapters, but here we have true people to illustrate or to embody those qualities, if you want. Because as all of you know, Confucianism is, at least for me, is the choice of the word might be a little bit clumsy, but it's a machine to create gentlemen, okay? And what is a gentleman, according to Confucian doctrine? Is someone having developed the four seeds, okay? The four seeds, when, according to Mencius, and when those four seeds of morality are developed, we got what the Westerners call the Cardinal Virtues, okay? So wisdom, courage, humanity, and justice. And even if those four cardinal virtues are all equally important, I think there's a kind of hierarchy in them. For example, at 27, I have yet to see anyone who can recognize his own errors and bring charges against himself willing. As Joseph said, it's probably the most difficult thing to do for any people, and probably only a true gentleman would be capable to do it. And to be capable to do it, you need the four cardinal virtues acting together. You need to be wise, you need to be courageous, you need to be humane to yourself and to others, because to see a flaw in yourself, it's not to beat you up, but only to see the flaw and to do something to improve yourself. Because to be a gentleman is not to be a victim of anxiety or depression or self-deprecatory behavior, but to keep on the journey of self-improvement. And because of those qualities, you would be truly just to yourself. And because you're capable to be just to yourself, you would be capable to be just to others. So once again, those three sections are truly exciting because it put flesh on the book 2, section 6 that all of you know. I stop here.
That's wonderfully put. Wonderfully put. I really like that. And I was thinking actually along the same lines about how the cardinal virtues actually help you look at yourself objectively. However, putting them into practice, have you ever met the sage, essentially, is what we're saying. And it's having a framework of looking at yourself, but not only that, it's being able to execute on that framework, and that's a very challenging thing to do. Wonderfully put. And I liked how you mentioned that they're interrelated. So we have Brian up next, followed by, great comments thus far, followed by Ella, then Kevin.
I had a question about 28 and thinking about how Confucius was saying that people should pursue Ren, and that was kind of the highest level you could reach. And in this case, I was just kind of intrigued that would he consider this self-correcting of people like really a vital part of achieving like Ren, because it seemed like in some of the previous examples, they had given some people who were quite noteworthy, but he always felt like he couldn't make any judgment about, whether they had the best character. But then here he's saying, well, if it's a small town, you're bound to find somebody with a pretty good character, but not as eager to correct themselves. So I was just wondering if that was one element for him of this trying to achieve Ren.
Good. Would Jason or Aman, would you mind commenting on the relationship between Ren and number 28, this idea of self-knowledge?
Okay, yeah. I think James a few weeks ago make a good point. Okay, he talked about, I think James said, Ren is a trademark for Confucian. I think that's a good comment, and I'm going to steal his word. Just like a Tao is the the trademark for the Taoism. So okay, so put this way, Confucius, he put a very high standard as Ren, okay, but so it's a kind of not able to reach and go. So it's a trademark. So it's virtual, okay, it's there. And in 28, I will answer specifically, technically, I will answer no. He's not talking about Ren. He's talking about self-improvement. He talk about eager to learn, okay, that's a self-improvement. He is talking about it's easy to start, okay, but you have to keep working on this one. I think that's his essence on everything. And during this period time, even I read Confucius when I was very young, but doing this translation and I study more on the Western philosophy, I start to understand the big thing Confucius is teaching is self-improving. That's the most important. Doesn't matter what you are doing. The self-improving is his message keep talking about. That's why he handing the Ren as a very high standard, so you can keep pursuing it. And in this chapter 28, he's talking about, well, you are good to people, you are good to your work. It's, you can do it, but you have to keep working, improving yourself, including if you have faults, you have charge against yourself. That's his word. Even you have no fault, you have to keep improving. I think that's the Confucius philosophy.
And would you say it's more about self-improvement than, say, duty?
I think it's more important that when the duty, I always kind of, I translate as duty, okay, but I'm not sure it's probably not a proper translation or something. When I think his focus are more on self-improve, okay.
Yes, yes.
My boss tell me what to do. Okay, it's
Yeah.
more than, oh, that's my job description. Less on this sense, more on keep. When you devote to your job, you keep improving. You never satisfied. Let's put it this way: you never satisfied. Keep working on that.
Yeah. I don't know if I may interrupt.
Please, go ahead.
I think it's interesting the distinction that you made between self-improvement and duty, okay? Because in Confucian education, from our childhood, we are expected to fulfill our duty first to our family, second to the state, and third to our family. And I don't know where you would put the job in the family or the state, it's debatable. But at the foundation of the capacity to fulfill your duties in those three dimensions or spheres of social life is 修身, okay? 修身齐家平天下, 治国平天下. So it's to cultivate yourself. So it's truly the foundation. If you're not cultivating yourself or self-improving continuously, you would not be capable to fulfill your duties in the three dimensions of 齐家, 治国, and 平天下. Okay, and of course, from a very down-to-earth reflection, it's okay if you're not capable to be at the highest level of 平天下, meaning to bring peace to the world, but at least you are invited to be at the first level of a gentleman, meaning to improve yourself, your character, which is 修身. And if you're capable, you go to the next step, which is 齐家, put order in your family. If you're more capable, you would go to 治国, assist the state. And if you're truly among the brightest gentlemen of your generation, it would be the last step would be 平天下, bring peace to the world.
That makes sense. With one of the famous quotes is the idea of changing yourself. I know that that was his grandson that actually had made that statement. The ability to change yourself before you're changing anything else and changing the rest of the world it's in line with that, but it's logical as well. This idea that you need to be able to improve your own self before you can even perform your duties to the state or to your family, that, you know, taking care of yourself and understanding yourself is instrumental to that process. So I would very much appreciate that. Thank you for mentioning that kind of hierarchy and putting it into context for me. Ella, thank you for your patience.
Oh, no, I'm enjoying the conversation. Thank you. My comments would be on the same topic. What comes to mind is the theory of mind, the loop between ourselves and others, in that if we can understand how they may be feeling via body language or facial expression, nonverbal expression, or what they explicitly communicate to us, if we really get it inside, how they're feeling, how they're thinking, or we try to as best we can, and we can then more appropriately respond. So if we're in that loop and we have theory of mind, and I think most people do, I don't think all people do, but most do. If we have that, given that, Carl Jung, depth psychology, talks about going beyond the ego into learning more about oneself. And it does seem to be ego related. If you're stuck in ego, it's very difficult to relate to others, to understand what they may need or want, or what they're trying to express or have accepted, or what they're trying to communicate to you. And so, he opens that window to the self to go deeper. And it's kind of a journey for anyone who chooses to do it and do the shadow work and other types of endeavors. And I just wanted to say that another psychologist, Murray Bowen, and this will be my final thought, Murray Bowen, B-O-W-E-N, family systems theory, talks about how, in a family system, which also relates to the larger society, I would say, to tie into the last speaker's comments. So my trend is self and development, self-awareness. It's hard to do in the moment, but just general development beyond ego, being able to pick up on what others are trying to generate to us, and then into the family or the people that surround you, your community. And Murray Bowen says that when we have dysfunction in our families or conflict, we can't sometimes change those things. If we can, we should, but if we can't, and often we can't, we change ourselves. And he's done a lot of work with this, a lot of, he's passed on now, but there's others have picked it up, and they've done a lot of work on it and research. And if one changes oneself, one can affect others in the immediate family, and then one can affect the community, and one can affect at a larger scale in the state, country, etc. So those are my thoughts. I don't think
It's interesting. I mean, it reminds me of actually a Viktor Frankl quote that if you cannot change your circumstances, then your challenge is to change yourself. And then that changing of oneself is then the ability to actually influence others. And I think that that's true. I really find that to be the case, is that one is that you become an example for other people. And we tend to mimic other people, so that you say to someone that I want to be like that. I want to be virtuous. This is the path, not only this is the path to happiness. So that it's the path to what I think to be the right way. And so I think that that's a profound point that you're making, is that if you're in a situation that where everything around you is basically falling apart, how do you become the example? What is the process? And I think that what Confucius is talking about here is this idea of self-evaluation within that process is critical. So wonderful points, Ella. And so next up I have Kevin.
Thank you, everyone. Great comment. My take, I would use the self first one, 26. Self aspiration. You got three talking, one from Zilu. Zilu he's talk about sharing with whatever have wealthy or and Yehui, another is I go to self. I'm already got a wealth. Not just sharing. I'm also hiding on sharing. Not people. I contribute something people even not notice. And Confucius self, for master said, I would say mutual way. I would comfort the old or trust my friend and take care of the young. It's not just you. You kind of, it's even ourselves growing. When I have a child, hopefully someone can take care of me. During me, you know, I can have friends, trust each other. And when I get old, somebody take care of me. So this is, it's not just the individual work, it's a community as generation by generation. It's 26. By the way, the body is, I'm not sure it's not in Analects called 大同世界. It's basically the world. So we are similar. Everybody got from birth to pass away. So we got this cycle. Each stage will have different needs. So it's a sharing. And 27, I would use a self-reflection and self-examination. Basically,
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Self-reflection and what?
self-examination.
Oh, self-examination. Thank you.
Yeah, it's this one. Maybe self-examination you don't take it too serious about it. It's too much. Maybe yeah, it's going to criticize yourself too much. This way, let me thought about from Muslim. They got 5 times pray right every day, and also in chapter 1, this Analects 4. Zhenzi said each day examine myself in 3 ways or 3 times. To check what am I doing, what am I thinking is correct or not. So it's a similar situation. You see, it's kind of religious way. We got 3 times, 2 times somebody Christian in Sunday. We be in a church. We try, you know, purify yourself and clear your mind, empty your mind, and learn something more. The same for me is a similar deal. The last one, the 528.
Mhm.
It's about is a good eager to learn, out for self-improvement. It's a growing mindset. It's not a firm fixed. Confucius always, if we consider Confucius the sage, we thought he's like a fixing mind. He is like a master. He know everything. He don't need to study. He mentioned so many places. He learned himself and from others. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And I do want to come back. I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to comment, and I believe Brian is next. But I want to come back to a couple of things that we talked about as far as self-examination, you know, is concerned. And specifically, I was just wondering if there's anything that is kind of prescriptive in the sense as far as what Confucius would do in a practical sense. So I would look at it from a Stoic perspective. One of the things that you do at the end of the day is you examine yourself. You ask yourself 3 different questions. You know, you ask yourself, you know, what did you do right? What did you do wrong? And how can you become your ideal self? You can frame it in different ways, but it's this self-examination that you're doing on a daily basis in order to improve, you know, and to get better insight and objectively look at yourself and to see if you're managing yourself, to Quan's point, towards a set of values that, you know, like the Cardinal Virtues. But does Confucius really give us anything in a practical sense? He's telling us to do this, but does he give us the practical tools to actually execute this? Now, because it's, in a way, I feel like in the fact that he hasn't met anybody like this is the sage that he's saying, essentially, in a way, that he's never met anybody that's been able to really objectively look at themselves. But I'd be curious to know if there's any real practice that we could apply to this. Aman, actually, I'm gonna wait 1 minute, Brian. If you, I'm gonna let Aman comment.
Oh no,
maybe.
I wanted to allow Brian to go
Okay,
first.
so let's
'cause
let Brian. I apologize, Brian. Go ahead, Brian first.
Oh, that first of all, it's a great question. It's one of the things I was wondering here, because if you accuse yourself, that's not the end of a transformation or improvement. That's the beginning. What are the other steps? Learning, I guess, is a big part of the rest, I suppose. But I had another question. It's not as important as the one that was just raised, but the other question I had is maybe it ties in the very first 25. There's I think they're
of your version, right?
yeah, let each of you tell his wishes. And so the first one is material, emotional, and then
Oh yes, okay, yeah.
social. When I first heard that, I thought this is hierarchical in the way we've been talking about some of the other progressions that have been laid out, very well laid out, I thought, in this discussion. I really appreciate all that. But then I thought, well, maybe this isn't a progression. Maybe this is just 3 different focuses, and one does not preclude the other, or put it differently, also preempt the other. And also importantly, you're never going to be perfect in any one of these, so you don't have to perfect this selfless sharing of material goods, this humble attitude, before you move on to what Confucius suggests, I think, is the better focus. So it's really, I don't know, that question in my mind, I'm coming out that it's just a different focus, and that what he's suggesting is this is a better focus. Doesn't preclude the others, and doesn't require that you master the others before you move on. That's where I'm coming out on that, but I just would appreciate some comment on that. But also with Joe's question, I think is really a great question.
Would anybody like to comment on either of our questions? And go ahead. Yes, please, Aman.
So I've been trying to take this all in and think about it. So I'll kind of see which one of these questions I best address this way. We are examining this and talking about this in terms of dichotomies that don't necessarily exist in the mind of the original author. When we talk about things like duty versus self-cultivation, or prescriptive versus descriptive. And to Brian's question, I can answer it. It's not satisfying. What are the specifics that are given for what do you do with this? You learn to discern right from wrong. That's as simple as it could be. It's incredibly simple, but it's not easy. And I think that's the message that keeps getting reiterated here. The lesson is simple: discern what is right and discern what is wrong. But doing that in each ever differing circumstance with so many different variables at play is a work of a virtuoso. It's a lifetime of coming up short in making those estimations sometimes, but getting better at it. And this goes back to what Jason was talking about, Ren as a trademark. I agree with that. And I kind of like the idea that, Ren, franchised by Confucius, original trademark, circa 532 BCE. That's a long franchise to have. Having that sort of impossible goal to achieve, we saw that before when we talked about the Tao Te Ching. It's not an uncommon sort of tactic of a really good teacher. Give you something you can't do, but you can always be working at, so you can always be improving, always be cultivating, always be polishing and grinding, always getting better at that discernment of right from wrong in every single circumstance. And there is that passage, Quan, that you pointed to where he talked about at 30, at 40, at 50, at 70, I could follow my heart's desire without fearing to be in error, which is not to say I wasn't ever wrong when I hit 70. But at that point, the anxiety that he'd get it so wrong it would be irredeemable had fled, because he'd done it for 40 plus years of being that virtuoso, learning, being eager to learn how to do it better. That's why I do like that choice of translation for hao shao or hao she, you know, good study. I think that eager to learn is a really good way of translating that. Something Ella said actually struck me too about a philosophy of mind or a theory of mind and knowing ourselves through others, which ties into this idea of a dichotomy between duty and self-cultivation. We have an idea in philosophy of mind that the only identity that one actually develops is through the interactions with others. You only become an individuated person by knowing and being known by those around you. I think I may have mentioned this before, but Wall-E, which was a Pixar movie, does an excellent job in imparting this concept at a very simple level for, you know, a childhood audience in a beautiful way. The idea of duty versus self-cultivation is a false dichotomy to Confucius' mind. You become better at developing yourself by upholding that duty you have to be to other people. And that is the foundation of Ren. That doesn't mean you are Ren, but you might be doing Ren a little bit, and you do it better and you do it better and you do it better through sheer practice. Just like if you do 10 push-ups today, you can probably do 12 tomorrow and 13 the day after that, because it just builds on its own progression. That was me thinking about everything everyone said. And I don't know whose questions I absolutely addressed, but hopefully some of you got something from it.
Well, I did. I mean, especially the first part is the simple part, you know, what is right action? What is the right action? And I think
simple,
there are
not easy. That
simple,
is a
not easy,
dichotomy.
you know,
They're not the same.
Exactly. You know, it's one of the things that it's one of the things that I like about Stoicism is this idea. It's often referred to as the fundamental rule, but it's also widely known as the dichotomy of control. You know, it's very easy in theory. Like this is the only thing, and it comes back to something that Ella was talking about, changing yourself. That is what you can actually do. Fundamentally, this is what's in your power. So you can change yourself. Very hard to do. Very, very hard to do. And I really liked what you talked about is the idea of how we mirror ourselves after others. I think that that's a really important point, and I mentioned it already, and I talked about it, and I've been reading a little bit about mimetic desire. So this idea is where do our desires actually come from? They come from other people. Usually, we're mimicking other people's actions. It's an interesting theory, but it also gives theory as to why there are conflicts in societies as well. So yeah, anyway, my thoughts are all over the place too, because you answered so many questions. So it was great. Quan. Wait, James followed by Quan. Forgive me.
Oh, that's okay, James.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, just I just on this question of what is the meaning of, or what is the tendency for Confucius in his teaching, what is the practical tendency of the teaching? And I think it's you have to. I look at it as a master class. In other words, we're supposed to be experiencing Confucius's teaching to his students, but he's not just using, he's not just teaching the bare virtues. He has, you know, he has a certain range of virtues, just like the Western philosophy has a range of virtues. which Li Quan was talking about, Quan Li, sorry. But besides the range of virtues, there is the practical application. He's talking about families, people's positions, people's jobs, comparisons. He's giving comparisons of actions, of statements of different people, and it's all in a format where you have to think for yourself. So that's why I call it a master class. This is for advanced students. You can't, you could go get a book on what Confucius meant. I'm sure there are some of those around. But to actually read Confucius means you have to do a lot of thinking. And that's exactly what the master intended.
Beautifully put. Quan, would you like?
Yes. What I would like to say, that as all of you probably already understood, is that the goal is the way, or the way is the goal. And the first Confucian classics is the I Ching. Okay, we often forget that the I Ching is not is the first Confucian classic for many centuries. And precisely when we were talking for the last 20 or 30 minutes about the fact that in reality, deeply, there's no dichotomy between the way and the final virtues, if you want, is precisely that life is offering us everyday situations, okay? And you know that the I Ching is made of the 64 shu, or 64 hexagrams. And those 64 hexagrams are archetypical representations of relations in 64 archetypical situation represented by the 64 hexagrams. And the other thing that is interesting that I want to stress, because that is one of the fundamental teachings of the I Ching, is that that hexagram is formed by a lower trigram and an upper trigram. In Confucian philosophy, as interpreted by Wang Pi in the 3rd century AD, the lower trigram represents the animal kingdom, and the upper trigram represent the divine kingdom. And why do I say that? It's because one of our colleagues that I don't remember who, said, I think it's Eamon, but I'm not sure, said that there's not necessarily a hierarchy, in the sense that those things are simultaneous. It's an existential reality, okay? You can develop the virtues, courage, wisdom, humanity, and so on, but the flesh is still there, okay? The animal is still there, and here animal is not a bad word, okay? There's nothing derogatory, okay? It means the flesh, with the needs of the flesh. You need to eat, you need to protect your body, you need to be in the house, and so on. And it goes back to the very down-to-earth of Confucian philosophy. It can be very heavenly, but it's also very earthly, okay? To go back to the language of the I Ching. I don't remember what section, but somewhere in the Analects, Confucius said, the gentleman like wealth, and the gentleman enjoy pleasure and sex and so on, and money and position, but he would not trade those things by selling his soul. Okay, well, it was not exactly those words, but I think you understand what I mean. He would not, because it would be a Christian interpretation by saying he would sell his soul. But you understand what I mean. He would not do it by renouncing to his principles, okay? So so returning to the lower trigram and the upper trigram, the animal is always there, but is the animal, and once again, animal is not derogatory, but is the animal guided by the divine principles or the heavenly principles? Okay, and I think that is precisely the challenge of the gentleman. Okay, to live his body and to answer to the need and the desire of that body, but at the same time to be guided by those divine principles. And the I Ching is precisely a practical manual. Okay, those 64 hexagrams are 64 archetypical situations that would suggest the possible answer or response, a living response that you would give to a living situations that would challenge you.
So let me just ask a quick question based on what you just said. When you're talking about the divine kingdom or the divine principles that you're managing yourself towards, and you're talking about the I Ching, is this more of a rational way of looking at the world? Because it sounds like that's what that's what you're versus, say, an ideal kind of versus when we say divine, we think of something spiritual versus, when I think of the analytical in the way the I Ching is structured.
Yes, according to Wang Pi, the 3 lines of the upper trigram correspond what would be the principles, if I use Western terminology,
Okay.
of beauty, goodness, and truth. Okay, if I try to make a match with the Plato lexicon, for example,
Okay.
if you use the chapter 7, which is the allegory of the cave by Plato, would suggest an epistemological journey to beauty, goodness, and truth, and Plato calls truth the son of the absolute. The 3 lines of the upper trigram, according to Wang Pi, and that Wang Pi interpretation has been accepted by the scholars after him. The first line of the upper trigram would be beauty, and it corresponds to the cardinal virtue of justice. The second line of the upper trigram would be goodness, and would be correspond to the cardinal virtues of courage and humanity. And the third and ultimate line of the upper trigram correspond to truth, which is wisdom, okay, in the Confucian and Mencian lexicon. And since Wang Pi was a guy of the 3rd century AD, I would say that most of imperial China has been modeled according to that philosophical understanding of the I Ching. And the I Ching has been the ethical and epistemological guide of the Chinese scholars for practically 17th, 18th centuries, according to the Wang Pi interpretation.
This is fantastic. I thank you so much, Juan, for that. That really actually is very deep and gives me a lot of insights into the Analects and into Confucius, and even potentially into China today. So thank you very much for that. Great contributions. Very, very grateful. Jason.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to what James talked about. This class is a master class. Okay, so I just focus on his question. I think that I think you also Joe also asked about when you talk about respect, rectify yourself, right? What's how to do it? But I think the whole Confucius teaching, especially on the analog, it's kind of like Aristotle's Nicomachean, right? It's not talking about metaphysics of ethics. Okay, he's talking about how to. Okay, he has already assumed both Aristotle and Confucius already assume you know what's right, what's wrong, and just tell you how to do it. So knowing what's right, what's wrong is easy. It's simple, but it's not easy to do it. Just like Among said. So if you are looking for what Confucius teaches, what's the objective way to decide this one is right, this one is wrong, probably you don't find the answer. And he is going to tell you is how to do it, not what is right, what is wrong. That's not his area. He just tell you how to do it. I think that's the way he's teaching.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Quan, did you have something else, or did you just forget to put your hand down?
Oh, just forget. I think that it did not disappear in time.
Okay. James, did you? Is that it from before?
Yeah, I didn't put my, I didn't, that's from before. Yeah, sorry about that.
Well, I'm glad that we cleared up a lot here, specifically the relationships, using Plato as an example is actually very helpful for my own personal understanding. Also, just as a side note, Pin led a really very good talk at the Asian Philosophies group on the I Ching. And I don't know if anybody has access to that YouTube, but all your YouTubes are accessible, right, on your web page, correct? Yeah, I'll try and post a link here shortly. But for anybody that's more interested in learning more about the I Ching, I know I am after what Quan has just shared here.
I just want to focus. The Pin is going to talk about I Ching at the end of October. Okay, he's going.
Really?
He's going to talk about the first one, the Qian. So he's going to chapter by chapter going to talk about it. So.
Fantastic.
Oh, excellent.
That is really going to be
Yeah.
a lot of fun.
Don't fix that because I'm still convincing him. So.
Oh, okay.
He's in Taiwan now, so.
Well, we can all email him and actually
just.
So as
I to tell him, yeah, everybody is expecting that.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll shame him into doing it. So okay. That was I really enjoyed covering those 3 verses. I think it's a great way to close book 5. And so now we will go on to book 6, and we'll be covering we'll probably only have time for the first 3 verses this evening. Normally we don't we kind of keep on schedule. It's important, but I thought that this was just really interesting, and I appreciated everyone's contributions. So with that being said, would Penny or James like to read either one? Penny, would you mind reading verses chapters 1, 2, and 3 in book 6? They're actually quite long. Is that what you want to cover, Jason?
I think that should be fine, right?
Okay.
Yeah, we can try. Yeah.
Okay. Book 6, chapter 1. The master said, "There is Young. He might occupy the place of a prince." Young Kung asked about Su Sang Po Si. The master said, "He may pass. He does not mind small matters." Chung Kung said, "If a man cherish in himself a reverential feeling of the necessity of attention to business, though he may be easy in small matters in his government of the people, that may be allowed. But if he cherish in himself that easy feeling and also carry it out in his practice, is not such an easy mode of procedure excessive?" The master said, "Young words are right." Chapter 2. The Duke I asked which of the disciples loved to learn. Confucius replied to him, there was Yanhui, he loved to learn. He did not transfer his anger. He did not repeat a fault. Unfortunately, his appointed time was short and he died. And now there is not such another. I have not yet heard of anyone who loves to learn as he did. Chapter 3. Tsuwa being employed on a mission to Qi, the disciple Zan requested grain for his mother. The master said, give her a fu. Yan requested more.
Sorry, I think you read the number 4 already.
No, this is number 3 in our version.
This is, this is in my,
So this may be another.
Okay. So,
Another one of those.
So should we stop?
yeah, I think we should stop here. Stop
Yeah,
on-
that's why I was
Okay.
asking that this
yeah,
was
it was pretty
kind of-
long.
that was pretty long. That this would be a lot to cover, and then
Yeah,
the last
so I
40
think
minutes.
yeah.
So the first 2. Okay, so we're just one off. Okay.
Oh, okay. So
Okay.
because the first one is very short, so some of the version. Okay, so just
So there's
Ah,
okay. There's all right. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
I think
you
we
are
got
right.
it.
You are right. Some of them put these two together. Okay. Yeah, the one, my 1 and the 2, in some version put let me see. Yeah,
James Legge is the oldest version in English, and it would make sense that he would combine 1 and 2, thinking that's too short to be its own chapter. But a lot of translators do separate out that the very first one is only
What's-
something like 8 characters.
Oh wow.
okay, I will explain. I think they should separate. Sorry.
So thank you, Penny, for reading, and thank you for always reading, because that second line was very hard to read. It was not. I mean, that was just. Yeah. So thank you. You did it beautifully. Aman, would you let mine?
If I can remember how to unmute, yes, I'll read the DC Lao. Yung Ye, Book 6, verse 1. The master said, Yung could be given the seat facing south. Number 2. Zhonggong asked about Su Sang Po Tzu. The master said, it is his simplicity of style that makes him acceptable. Zhonggong said, in ruling over the common people, it is not acceptable to hold oneself in reverence and merely to be simple in the measures one takes. On the other hand, it is not carrying simplicity too far to be simple in the way one holds oneself as well as in the measures one takes. The master said, Jung is right in what he says. And a word on my Chinese, the DC Lao is written in the Wade Giles system as opposed to pinyin. So if my pronunciation is off, you'll have to forgive me.
All is forgiven. So thank you very much for that.
Are we going to have another one?
I thought, yeah, another.
Sorry, number
yeah.
3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Number
That's,
4.
Well,
okay. That's what. Yeah. Okay.
This is what we get for going to another book. Book 6, verse 3. When Duke I asked which of his disciples was eager to learn, Confucius answered, there was one, Yan Hui, who was eager to learn. He did not vent his anger upon an innocent person, nor did he make the same mistake twice. Unfortunately, his allotted span was a short one, and he died. Now there is no one eager to learn has come to my notice.
Well, it'll be interesting to hear what people have to say about that one in particular. Yeah, I guess one way of not making mistakes is dying young. But I don't mean to joke, but go ahead, Jason.
Jim, you are not joking. Actually, just like I said, the only 3 people qualify as eager to learn. One is Yan Hui, who died young, and another one is Wei Wenzi, Zhao Wenzi, right? We remember 2 chapters.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the student asked why he has got the posthumous name Wen. He said because he's eager to learn. So he already dead. I don't know if die young or not, but he's already dead. Okay. And another one is Confucius himself. He lived to 70 years old. So, so that's the case. Okay, so this one I don't know the title's name, and the Chinese name usually called Yongyi. Okay, so I tend to preserve the original Chinese chapter name, so I just have to translate as Yong. Okay, so it will be odd, but basically that's what it means. Okay, so the reason a lot of book, a lot of translation, a lot of book, or what do you call it, analects, put the 6.1 and 6.2 together because they are the same people, not because they are short, because they are the same people. Yong is also Zhong Gong. Okay, that's the same people. Okay, so last name is Lan. Okay, so they are the same people, and so they consider as these 2 are together. But I think you should separate because they are different subjects, different things. Okay, so let me explain. Even the same conversation with Zhong Gong or Yong. Okay. So the first one, Master said, Yong, you can take charge of a government. And Aman will prefer to it, Yong, you can occupy the south-facing seat. So some translation will put you can be a prince. So basics in Chinese tradition, if you are in charge of some office, or in general, you are the lord, the prince, the emperor, your seat always facing south. So when Confucius said, Yong, you can take charge, you can occupy the south-facing seat. I don't think Confucius means you can be an emperor, can be a prince. I think that he meant you can be in charge of an office. Okay, so that means his capability. 6.2, that's why I think they are different subjects, even the same person. So Zhong Gong is also Yong, because Confucius will call his given name Yong. But when the person write down, will use his courteous name, Zhong Gong, okay, be polite. So Zhong Gong asks about Zhisang Bozi. Okay, that's a person, Zhisang Bozi. This person has been show up in Zhuangzi's writing. Okay. But of course, Zhuangzi's writing we can never consider as a historical truth, because a lot of things just fable. So Zhuangzi talk about Zhisang Zhibo. In Zhuangzi, his name is Sanghu. Okay, Sanghu. Okay, so he is Taoist sage. So he's a minimalist. Okay, so he keep everything simple. So when he died, his friend just singing and play music next to his body. And Confucius sent Zhigong to pay respect to Zhisang Bozi, but they say, oh, why you are doing this? The people die, you are singing and play music, and blah, blah, blah. That's the Zhuangzi's talking. So the reason I bring up this one is it shows Zhisang Bozi is a famous Taoist sage during that time. That's why Zhong Gong asked about him. So he probably somebody people know is Taoist people. Okay, so he keep everything simple. So that's why Zhong Gong asked this question. Zhong Gong asked about Zhisang Bozi. The master said he's simple. Okay, so he's simple. Okay, so minimalist. Okay. Zhong Gong said, being respectable in the office and the simple in action toward the people is fine. Okay. Oh no, let me read my translation. Here's another thing. Zhong Gong said, being respectable in the office and the simple in action toward the people, it is fine. Being simple in the office and the simple in action, is this too simple? Okay, so he means it's too simple. So you have to be respectable in office, but just, you know, simple when you do action. Okay, but the master say, I agree with Yong's word. Okay, so basically here is talking about Confucius' different disagreement with Taoism, right? Taoism want to keep everything simple. This point, Confucius agree, when you do things, make it simple, okay? Confucius does not disagree on this. But what Confucius want to talk about is be respectful, okay? 敬, okay? So that means you are in the office. You can keep simple, but you cannot wear your shirt or just wear your sandal. You still have to be respectable. Even your action is simple. So that's the difference between Confucius and Taoism teaching. Okay. And the reason I keep another translation because I'm still working on this one because probably not everybody interested in this. I just make it simple because the Chinese is very difficult to translate by using word by word because he's talking about a question but the negative and the negative. So I just translate make it simple. Okay, like he said, this
no
is
pun intended.
Okay, but in the translation, I try very hard to translate 不义不可服. That means as a question, you are not allowed. It's okay. So it's very difficult to translate. So I just make it simple, you know. And I will try to work on a better way. But you know that's the language problem I'm facing now. You know. Chapter 3. Duke I of Du asked, which of the disciples are eager to learn? Okay. Confucius replied. Okay, so here Duke I is the Lord, Confucius' boss. So Confucius, they will not say the master said, because Confucius had to reply the question, not teacher. So Confucius said, there was Yan Hui who was eager to learn. He never shifted his anger and never repeated his errors. Unfortunately, his life was short. He died already. Now there are none. I have not heard of anyone who is eager to learn. I think we already talked about this because Yan Hui is the one just like Confucius, eager to learn. And now nobody else eager to learn.
Thank you very much for that. Aman, would you like to comment? I'd be interested in this in a simple way, please.
It's a little inside baseball I see in that first 3 verses because you retained a lot of my suggestions there for posterity. So everybody got to see what the process of, you know, collaborating with Jason on this kind of looks like. And my gratitude, my undying gratitude. I had to skip ahead to make sure that it wasn't the entirety of book 6 and it appears just those first 3 verses. I won't take a verse by verse breakdown. I will spend just a moment with verse 3 because there's not a lot of the Analects that emotes or, you know, really has sort of emotional draw in a big way. This is the one exception where you can almost hear the master's pain dripping off the page talking about his loss of Yinwei, because this verse always strikes me when he's, you know, which of your disciples is eager to learn? And instead of saying none or saying there was one, there was Yinwei, there was one, that And later you'll get another verse where it'll talk about the students coming to Confucius and saying, Master, aren't you overdoing it in your grief? And he basically saying, if not for this guy, then who do I grieve? This was Confucius' paramour in every real sense of the term. He loved Yin Wei probably more than his own children, more than anyone else. And it devastated him. And you can actually hear it. If I were to make an educated guess about any one thing that was actually retained directly from the lips of Confucius, faithfully through the centuries, it would probably be this verse. Because whoever heard him say this was impacted by it so deeply that I don't think they forgot how devastated their master was to lose his star student, and not because he gave him anything. He didn't bring riches to the school. He didn't bring status. He didn't bring anything other than being his most devoted and most apt pupil. So I just want to draw attention to that and hear people's thoughts. But again, thank you for the inside baseball. It's nice to actually see that those are still jockeying back and forth.
Thank you, Aman, especially for the the context in giving us with Yan. I'm going to say the name wrong. Yan Wei. Yeah. Okay. So no, you do get a feeling of loss in this, and yeah, it's something that you kind of, as Jason alluded to earlier, there's only 3 people in the Analects that seem to love learning like Confucius. Quan, would you like to comment?
Yes, I would like to add something on the same verse that Amon just commented upon. Just going back to the 3 levels of duty, to the family, to the state, and to bring peace to the world. Let's not forget that Confucius was living in a period, in a very violent period, okay? Just before the period called officially the Warring States period. He was living at the end of the spring and autumn era, but we can consider that it's practically the warring period too at his time. And he wanted to create the school to produce advisors for the kings and for the princes in order to bring back peace to the Chinese world at the time, because of the dereliction of the Zhou royal house. And I mentioned Plato 10 minutes ago, but it was the same case for Plato, okay? Because at the time of Plato, Athens was going through a deliquescent state because of the war against Sparta and so on. And Plato wrote his dialogues too, with the ambition to create statesmen to bring back order and peace and civilization to his world. Same for Confucius. And the despair, Confucius' despair, when he mentioned Yan Hui and his strong emotional expression, was of course the reflection of a personal relation, but also the expression of his despair because he lost the only one that he thought would be capable to bring peace to the world among his students, because his main ambition was to restore the glory of the Zhou royal house and order and civilization to the Chinese world of that time.
Again, thank you for the context. I mean, I think that that's very important to understand, is that he not only lost a student, he felt like he lost somebody that could actually be a leader at a time that where he was trying to cultivate leaders, and that's I would really like to hear people's comments on chapter 2, and this this idea that though he may be easy in the small matters, I'm not reading Jason's, I could read Jason's, in his government of the people, that may be allowed. But if he cherish himself that easy feeling and also carry it out in his practice, is not such an easy mode of procedure excessive. Like, could you start to articulate, to elaborate on that for me a little bit, Jason? You already did to a certain degree, but this idea, this small, or Ahmad, you have your hand up. Sorry.
I'd be happy to let Jason go first, but I feel like somebody's got to stick up for the Taoist here, because book 6 is where they start getting laid into a little bit, and this is the first in many sort of cut and thrust towards Taoist of note, and or Taoist ideals. When he's talking about, when he asks, about him, the master says, he's fine, he's simple. And he says, yeah, but is it a bad thing that he's simple? And he's like, no, that's not the bad thing. So then what is wrong? Well, he takes that simplicity all the way through. He takes it from doing his job simply, to presenting himself simply, to basically losing the ritual. He loses the refinement of the ritual for the sake of what's easy, what's simple, what's convenient. And I think Jason touched on this a little bit, or intimated the idea that this is a figure you could almost see showing up to court, not properly dressed, his, shirt buttoned askew or his hair unkempt, just because, why bother today? I'm not going to put in the effort. This is all just pomp and circumstance, and who needs the pomp and circumstance? Well, Confucius wants the pomp and circumstance because that ritual was important. It served a purpose. And here's a figure, while he may have been a good administrator, he wasn't really good at the trappings of the job. And that is something that is a bridge too far for Confucian sensibilities. It won't be the last time you hear something like this in the Analects.
No, and it's interesting to see this kind of return to ritual, which I thought we covered in great detail in
Confucius has no casual Fridays.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. That makes it much more clear for me. Thank you. So James next. You're muted, James.
Yeah, I find it a little confusing. I was just wondering, did somebody say who Yang is at the end?
The
Jason,
master said Yang.
is right, yeah.
Zhong Gong, the same person as this.
It's the same person. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. So I think there's a meaning to that sentence, right? That in other words, if he has a certain, in my mind, he has certain modes of being easygoing that he is being accused of, that could be accused of being excessive. But this is Zhagang that is accusing.
No. Okay. Let me make it clear. Zhong Gong and Yong, they are the same person. Confucius' disciple. They are good at. Let me see. Okay, they are. He is good at. Just 1 minute. Okay. So he's same hometown with Confucius. And Zigong is the person, also another Confucius disciple. He's good in language. Confucius like to discuss the book of Old, okay, with him. Okay, that's the person who talk about when Confucius says something, he will reply in poem. Okay, so that's another person. Confucius sometimes want him to focus on his work and not just talking. Okay, so that's the person. And what's the person's name? 子商伯子. Okay, that's not Confucius' disciple. He must be the celebrity during that time. Okay, keep everything simple. So he is being viewed as a Taoist person. So here is the two Confucius and his student comment on the simple person who is the Taoist person. Okay. So I hope the relationship clear.
Okay, so
So
if I,
when you
if
see
I-
the 重公 or ran, okay, 子贡 is the person who talks so much, and when you see the 子路 is the person who acts so much, okay, 子路 is the person, okay, bravery person, he acts so much, and 子贡 probably talk too much. 樊迟 is another person who kind of not that smart. He responds, so he always asks a lot of questions. So we will talk about these people, later.
okay, so Confucius thinks he's very, Young is very, very capable. He
Yeah,
might-
they're good
yeah.
in administration. Okay, good in
Right.
administration. Okay.
Yeah, and he has a kind of like an up and down modulating attitude. He carries out. He has a easy feeling and carries it out in his practice. And he's being criticized by the Zhang Gong. So I mean, I take it as criticism. So if that's criticism, is the who is the Taoist here?
子商子伯, the person with long name. Okay.
But that's Yang. No, it's not. That's not Yang.
No. Okay.
It's in the verse before you're
Oh,
talking.
Yang,
Okay.
Yang is not being evaluated. Zhang Gong is not evaluating Yang. He's evaluating a third person.
Yes. The third person, 子商伯子. Okay, that's the person who has been evaluated.
Okay.
Okay, so Zhong Gong or Zhong Gong or Yong, that's a Confucius student, and here is a good guy. Okay, so they are criticize the Taoist person. Okay.
Okay, so if I'm on the side of the Taoist, that means I'm just Taoist, that's all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so basically, that's a difficult part in this text and also in all the Chinese novel, because people have many names, okay? You have the given name, you have a courteous name, and after you die, you have the posthumous name. So depend on what situation, they will use different names. Just like when you read the War and the Peace, right? When they use the middle name, last name, first name, that's all make this. And Chinese probably even worse, because later on they even have some call your nickname. Okay, so and the literature name, when you are a writer, you have a pen name. So it's very confusing. Yeah. They should change all to the same name. When I do the translation, I think about all put in the same name. But the problem is this: they use different name, have a different meaning. Because when Confucius called the person, he always call the given name. So he will call Yong. But when the author write the name, you will not say Yong, you will say Zhong Gong, because that's the courteous name. Okay. Yeah. So they are very careful on this. So for example, every time they say 子曰, the master said. But when Confucius is talking to his boss, the Lord, okay, Duke, okay, they will not say the master said. They will say Confucius reply, because you don't talk to your boss as master said. Okay, you talk to your boss, you reply the question. Okay, so they are very careful on this. And if I change all this to make it clear, then we lost this kind of subtlety.
Yeah. If I may interrupt, just a 30 seconds of contextualization. What Jason just said is also an indication, okay, that the social environment of Confucius is an environment of aristocrats, of noblemen. Okay, there's a they were called shrew, and probably the closest English translation would be the gentry, the lower nobility, the minor branches of aristocratic family. So the fact that there's often the word zi in front of the names of many of Confucius' disciples, that word zi is an indication of their noble birth. Okay, zi xia, zi lu, and etc. And don't be under the false impression that everyone in China at the time had a courteous name. Okay, only noblemen and people from the gentry, meaning the lower nobility, had courteous name.
Thank you very much for that. This is actually giving me context as to why this is being addressed the way it is. Aman, you had something that you wanted to add, I think.
I think it's been said really well, though I appreciate this because the particularity, like Jason said, without retaining it, you would lose that single detail of the Analects, which is actually a adjunct lesson in propriety and ritual and holding and rectifying names, keeping things in their proper order, in their proper place, and having people speak and be spoken of correctly. Like I said, know what is right versus what is wrong is simple. It is not always easy. And in fact, can become downright damn difficult and confounding, which is why a figure like Zi Sangbo would just eschew it. He would be like, this is too much. This is ridiculous. I spend so much time trying to make sure that I'm greeting everybody in the hall in the correct order and saying their names in the proper way when I address them, talking to them, so that I don't accidentally say to someone, well, your master said, when in fact that would be a huge social faux pas. He was somebody who eschewed all that and just said, no, this is ridiculous. We are in a dire straight period of all against all warfare. I'm not going to bother with these niceties and this, ridiculous form that needs to be kept when I've got chariots to get to a place. I've got grain to get to another place. I've got coolie labor that needs to be done here, there, or anywhere. And so he was sort of a celeb because he was a very efficient and very good administrator in his time. One who actually may have inspired Sima Chan's father to look to Taoists as, these guys can do it. These guys have the nuts and bolts and gravitas to actually really be who you want to emulate if you want to run a kingdom right. He made that argument and he didn't win. To put mildly, it was like, oh, that's a sweet notion, but no, because Confucianism comes with rules. Rules you can write down, rules you can get people to follow. It is also important to remember that the idea of presentism sometimes needs to be removed here, and remember that this is a compilation from many authors about their master many years after the fact and after many of the 100 schools of thought had developed. And so there's some polemic elements involved in the Analects. That's not just my opinion, it's actually the case. I can't point to this exact passage and say, this is strictly a polemic passage thrown in there to deal the Taoist a black eye. But it didn't hurt anyone's feelings if this got a little bit of editing to those ends somewhere along the way.
It's going to be interesting to see as this goes on, where this diverge, like from Taoism, in what sections that this actually comes up, because up until this point we haven't really seen a lot of a lot of criticism or even divergence from Taoism.
There wouldn't be any Taoist at this time in Confucius' life. There was no school of thought, no orthodoxy that would have called itself Taoist. Taoist existed about 500-ish years after the fact, but there were many figures that could be looked back at and said, oh, those were the well springs. That same figure, Sima Tan, is sometimes accredited as the guy who invented Taoism as an idea.
I see.
Yeah.
But yeah, you see the same thing in the Tao Te Ching, which also was written before there was quote unquote Taoism. But there was not a Confucianism by that point, but there was something called Ruism, which became synonymous with what we think of as Confucianism. And that just means scholarly pursuit, or that literati education. In the Tao Te Ching, we saw them sort of attacking the Confucian sacred cows in their own text. Here we see the Confucians coming back to their great text and saying, let's just take this whole, wei wu wei thing down a notch, because apparently there's a point where simple is too simple to be at all awe-inspiring or effective or useful in government.
I think this chapter probably the only chapter they are kind of criticize Taoism. Probably the only one. If you are looking for some place Confucius criticized Taoism, probably were disappointed. But if you read the Zhuangzi, you will be very happy to see Zhuangzi will make fun of Confucius all the time. So
But nowadays we have business practices where you're encouraged to allow the employees to find their own way, to basically give a lot of to give room for people to learn on the job, or to fight out their differences. You have recommended business practices today that are quite contrary to Confucianism. So I would feel askance to see that this is kind of like especially since this isn't the words of Confucius. This is basically he says, well, you say because Yang and Zhang Gang are identical, so they're otherwise we wouldn't even know of the without the scholarly understanding. But the modern view is that, well, of course, somebody who is in a high position has to cherish his ability to have a not so much an easy attitude, but to carry out easy mode of procedure. In other words, go ahead and do it with the least effort, but make sure it gets done. So and I can't imagine that in those days the same kind of concept might not be available to leaders, that they might do that sometimes. So I'm kind of like, wow, am I that anti-Confucius that they're saying now we have to criticize people who have an attitude of let the work develop itself in the environment, in the work environment?
Maybe I would like to offer another contextualization, okay? The world in which Confucius was living was a very codified world. For example, the young aristocrats of the time learned by heart the odes in the Shu Jing, okay, the classics of poems. And in diplomatic encounters, there are ways to open a diplomatic encounter that if you make a mistake in the choice of the poem, you would lose face and you would not be capable to go further in the diplomatic encounter. because it's a word defined by what we call culture. Okay, and it's like the Europeans of the Renaissance, for example, that if an European aristocrat would not show that he's capable to quote Plato or Aristotle or any of the philosophers of ancient times, he would be perceived as a barbarian. Well, it's the same at the time of Confucius. There are codes and there are words that you need to use in a very specific manner. And let's not forget that Confucius was part of that Shu social class, meaning the gentry. And that gentry, one of the functions of the gentry, well, one of the professions or the profession of the gentry is precisely to prepare the young aristocrat to enter the court, prepare intellectually and culturally. So when Confucius opened his school, it was to prepare gentlemen and statesmen, of course, but there was a much down-to-earth dimension to that. Okay, it's to prepare the young aristocrat how to pronounce correctly certain words or certain sentences, because there was, well, as you know, in China nowadays, you have a Putonghua, which is the national language, and you have about 350 dialects, okay? In the time of Confucius, you have what they call Yayu, which is the refined language of the aristocrats. And that Yayu was the correct pronunciation of the Zhou royal court. And among the very down-to-earth things that Confucius, or the Shu of his social layer, would teach to the young students are those very practical and down-to-earth stuff, plus the epistemological journey, okay, the way to morality, if you want, which is the higher part of the education. You need to give a good impression with the good pronunciation, with the right way to dress yourself and so on. Because if you remember in the Analects, you have some passages on the fact that the gentleman would not put that kind of clothes and that this kind of clothes. It's part of the education, down to earth portion of the education of a young aristocrat.
Okay, when do I start? When do I start work?
Aman.
I'm going to have to run here shortly.
Yes,
and
thank you for staying.
Thank you, Quan Li. You definitely got a lot of what I would say about the context of time and place. The only thing I wanted to add was, James, you were talking about business as being sort of this free-for-all, this boiling cauldron of allowing people the freedom to pursue nor to be innovative. And that is how we function as a business model in the Western world. If you look to the East, not even necessarily to China, because they're kind of late to the game of the business world, but Japan is actually a much better place to look for a long time sort of development of these kairetsus, which are these gigantic Japanese business structures, very predicated on Confucian values, where there's an extreme hierarchy and an extreme way that things are brought to people. It's not the way we do business, but it is a way that business can be done and was shown to be very successful for a long time. Though getting that sort of synthesis has been sort of the holy grail of the business world for a while, because it's not without its severe flaws, not least of which is, oh, there's a problem that keeps happening and we can't address it. Why not? Well, because nobody under you is going to speak up to point it out that the boss doesn't know what they're doing. A Korean airline kept having inordinate amounts of planes flying into mountainsides, more than any other airline. They tried to figure out why, and it was because a co-pilot who was lower ranked than pilot would not correct a pilot who was on a trajectory right into the side of a mountain. That's how deep that Confucian sort of hierarchical value ran. We can crash a whole airliner as long as we don't cause the boss to lose face. So it's not necessarily a perfect system either, but it was a system that definitely did develop industry and business and have some legs, and still does in much of the Eastern world.
Right.
Thank you all. I
Thank you.
really appreciate our small little cadre. Hope
This
to
is
see
fantastic.
some more people next week, and hope to be this well rested.
It's great
We'll
to
have
see
my
you.
grandson who gets to decide that. Have a good
Thank
night,
you.
all.
Thank
I
you
will
very
talk to
much,
you
Ahmad.
Ahmad. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah. You
Ciao.
know,
Bye, Jam.
take care.
Bye, Jim.
You know, I think that this, you know, and Quan, I thank you for your contributions this evening, and thank you everybody for their contributions. So it brings up an interesting question that I thought about as China becomes the world leader. You know, how, you know, it'll be a little bit different when if they become, you know, the leader in the global economy. You know, where's the innovation necessarily? It's going to be a little bit harder. It's got to come from somewhere still. Yeah, a hierarchical structure like the one that we're talking about doesn't lend itself to change or innovation all that much. But anyway, it's interesting to see how this still impacts China today.
Can I
Yeah.
let me
Yeah,
say
please
something?
say something about it. Yeah.
Yeah, since James, I just want to make it clear on this one. I think the attitude of reading Confucius, we don't not necessarily follow it. So I would say we always criticize it. That's how I'm doing it. And the same as we criticize Plato, or you don't follow, you don't always turn your cheek when somebody step you. By following Jesus' teaching, just like you don't always do you don't sacrifice your son by reading Bible. Okay, so I as other criticize on that. So I don't see we should always follow Confucius, but we read Confucius. Oh, that's why when I do translation, I always put a lot of effort on the background. If you don't see the background, it doesn't make sense. Okay, so just like Plato talk about philosophy kid, but the state he's talking about is a city state. He's not talking about China or Russia, this kind of huge state. Okay, same as Confucius talking about hierarchy, the structure. That society is very loose feudalism system. So he's talking about hierarchy. He's not talking about a big country, right? So I think so that's another thing. So I would suggest people to criticize Confucius. Otherwise, that make no sense to read it. So
I would like to say that China, I don't think that China would be the leader of the world. I think that China would be one of the leaders of the world.
Yes.
That China is coming back to her previous position of preeminence, of eminence, but there will be other civilization that would. What is the West is losing now is not power, but is losing the monopoly of power. It's not the same. Okay. I think that during the last 2 centuries, the West had the monopoly of global power, and the West is losing now the monopoly of global power, but the West is not losing power. I think there's the big nuance here.
That's a very important nuance, and I very much appreciate that distinction. Because you know that we think of like whoever's in the lead or leading, it's all or nothing, and that we apply that kind of principle. That's I appreciate that, and that's simply not the case.
Thank you. I think your name is Chen, right? Chen, right?
No, in Mandarin it's Jun, Junzi the Jun.
Oh, Jun,
Jun.
gentlemen.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
Mr. Jun.
Guan, I don't know if you're Cantonese, but Guan is the Cantonese pronunciation of Jun.
Okay, Guan. Okay, I got you. Okay, Cantonese pronunciation. But one thing you talk about is the monopoly. This kind. Another thing I would like to mention is a lot of people like to mention China. I think People's Republic of China equal to Confucius. And this part I will totally disagree. So they only take the top-down full part of Confucius. They didn't take the self-improvement part of Confucius. Okay, so that's I'd like to point out, because they only take the part benefit for the governor, not take the good part of. So I always like to say, learning Confucius, like filial piety. Don't learn it, then tell your kids, be filial piety. Tell yourself, okay, do I do that? Don't tell your kids. That's not the Confucius want to do. You want to talk to yourself, whether or not I do respect my parents, not tell your kids. Same as the government. The student, they are civil service people. They are government officer. Okay, they potential to it. So Confucius is teaching government officer, not teaching the people. Okay, so be loyalty, be follow the rule, be propriety. That's the government people, not the regular people. I think that's we need to make it clear, and that actually that's the
Yeah. And maybe a last historical note for tonight. Let's not forget that in 136 BCE, Emperor Wu of the Western Han Dynasty chose Rujia, meaning the school of the scholars that we call in the West now Confucianism, according to Kongzi, Master Kong. So Emperor Wu of Western Han Dynasty chose in 136 BCE the school of the scholars as the school to prepare the future leaders and administrators. Okay, so I think that Jason is very right to distinguish Confucianism as a school of personal epistemological development and Confucianism as the imperial school for producing bureaucrats. So you have two very different Confucianism. If you pick the epistemological journey or you pick the imperial bureaucracy school.
Interesting.
Joseph,
Yeah.
Joseph, on the question of innovation, I don't think innovation is that predictable. If you look at like all the goods that China produces, the way they produce them now, through the way they manufacture now is extremely innovative and involves a lot of innovation. And if you read the science magazines, you'll see a lot of scientific breakthroughs by Chinese scientists.
true.
Like
That's true.
like for example, they've recently synthesized starch. So theoretically, synthesizing starch could be like a game changer in terms of world food production. So little things like that, of coming out of China, so if you think that China is not innovative, that's probably not
It's
exact.
probably
That's
not
a myth.
fair.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah. It's and then that's true. And actually, they have even copied some mechanisms, at least, of creating innovations, essentially, specifically using certain financial instruments that fund innovation, that almost work like venture capital, so that as a way of actually kind of getting ideas or creating new innovations that actually change the market. And they've made a lot of advancements, especially in the semiconductor industry. But Ella, you have a comment you wanted to make. I see there.
Sure. Actually, I was going to follow up with Aman prior to his leaving, but I'll go ahead and offer it here. First of all, I just think the historical context that Aman and is it Chun? Am I saying that right, Chun?
No, it's Guan, because Chun is the Putonghua pronunciation and Guan is the Cantonese pronunciation, and I'm Cantonese.
Okay. And Quan and Jason, thank you so much. I love the historical context, and each of you have a different a very similar interpretation, but each of you has your own personality to or take on it as you naturally would, and that's very much appreciative, and adds a comprehensive aspect. I really appreciate your time, and I would just like to comment on the Ren, and I'm sorry I'm coming in at a later time into the discussion.
Sure.
Respect, altruism, and humanity, and I too get at what Jason was saying about when you read Confucius, you know, you do get that top-down feeling. This is what you should do. And, you know, in the reference to Plato, and that these things are intrinsic, that we know right from wrong. And we should just do it. And so when I first read it, yeah, I do have that reaction. But but I'm going to stay tuned in until I get the historical context. I'm going to listen, I'm going to learn, I'm going to intuit. And if you see the words respect, altruism, that's marvelous. And you see humanity, it's all there. All the goals are there. And my comment that I was going to make about Amon's comment about losing his student, I'm wondering if, just reflecting, possibly not, no one knows, but this student didn't respond to anger or take it out on other people, which is an admirable quality. And he also was very intelligent. And I'm wondering if those were the qualities. And of course, he wanted to, as you said, he wanted to educate people for business purposes, to help the state, to serve the state. I get that. That's his function. But I think his personal relationship with him might have been one of, he maybe saw himself in this student. And this may be my own projection, but he had put a lot of his ideas and values, and it sounds like the respect, altruism, and humanity, the Ren, were modeled in this particular student. And that is quite a loss, I would say, whenever anyone sees anyone with so much promise lost. So that's my
no, and that's a fair point. I think that's a very good point. I mean, he could be idealizing as well. Someone, as you know, there's two ends to this, but I think that what you brought up is, I think, one of the most important points is what Jason, as everybody is well, okay, that Jason has talked about, is this idea of bringing about bringing back or understanding the context. I think that that's one of the most important things when we're talking about the Analects itself. I think also just coming back to one thing that Ella had talked about here just a moment ago, and I think that this is important as far as this idea of self-improvement being removed from it. I think that that's profound in the sense that the way it's being taught, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, and what you had said, that Confucianism is taught without the self-improvement aspect of it, because that kind of removes the individualism aspect, does it not?
I don't know how about Quan had been taught. Okay, I don't know, you self-study or taught. Okay, but I know the school like to most of the people traditionally, they just memorize the Confucius say, right? What the Confucius say, they just quote it. I think the same as in the church. We like to quote what Jesus, what the Bible, without the context. So a lot of things, if you just read what Confucius said, then it would be, I don't like to read this way. I like to read his response, right? So I'm the very lousy person, and one day I kind of cleaned up my house then my friend come in and say, wow, Jason, you are so clean. I don't quote this one as I'm a clean person because I always lousy. But one day I kind of clean it. My friend or my boss come back and say, hey, Jason, your desk is clean, but doesn't mean I'm a clean person. That means I was dirty, but today is not that dirty. So I think that's the context we need to read. Just like people kind of criticize Muslim is not respectful women, but actually they are very respectful women because during that time they treat women very, very bad. So what they are doing is improve the situation of the female status. But if you look at today's status, or it's not, so it really depends on how are you going to read it, right? So if, for example, people always have 20 wives, and then they just dump whoever I don't like, and then they tell you only can have 4. That's an improvement. So.
Yeah, but I would say that from the educational standpoint, it depends also of your family. Okay, I was educated in the Chinese classical philosophy by my family, and it has been done in a very interesting manner because it has been done with the historical context. And as Jason probably know, the Chinese are very enthusiastic about their own history. Okay. Even the people who are not very educated because of the movies, because of the novels and so on, Chinese people of all levels of education know quite well Chinese history. And in my case, I have been taught Confucianism within a context of historical contextualization, and it has not been a boring experience. On the contrary, it was very, very interesting.
There's one other thing that that was just brought up by Ella that I think I would like to address as well. She talked about all of the things as far as altruism and some of the virtues that they're there in Confucianism. The virtues are there, but the way of actually the place that Confucius is coming from and how to actually how those virtues are enforced or implemented is very different. Is that true? Or Quan, do you disagree?
No, well, no. I want you to finish, and I would like to react.
Yes, I think that, I mean, there's different ways. I mean, virtues exist. They exist in Taoism. They exist in a lot of different philosophies. But I think the way Confucius, and this is what I've gathered thus far, it's much more, shall I say, you're obligated and you're duty bound, as opposed to having it as a choice. So I think that this is one of the distinctions maybe between other philosophies of life and Confucianism. It's much more dogmatic, if that would be fair, than say other approaches to virtue ethics. That's just my thought.
Yes, I would say that what is dogmatic is precisely that you are expected to bring something to the family, to the state, and to the world.
Right.
But rather than to say dogmatic, I would like to suggest you are invited to. Okay, it's proposed as an ideal, something to achieve, something to an ideal, something to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to use the word, the etymology of the word educare. Okay, education, as you probably know, comes from Latin educare, meaning to bring forth what is within. Okay, and I would say that Confucianism shared that educare with Western philosophy. If you remember the dialogue Meno by Plato, Meno being the aristocrat, and he had the slave boy with him, and Socrates, by asking the right question, was made the slave boy solve a geometrical problem, if you remember. So educare, to bring forth what is willing, is to be precisely for an educator to be skillful enough by asking the right question or by being a model to bring forth what the Confucianists would call the development of the four seeds. Okay, if you read Mencius, the four seeds are the four seeds are spontaneous feeling that you have if you are a human being. Okay, and those spontaneous capacities or seed would be the capacity to feel pity or commiseration for someone else, the capacity to receive, capacity to feel shame, and the capacity to distinguish right from wrong. Okay, so what is the fundamental of Confucius ethics is that all human beings possess those four natural seeds. And if those four natural seeds are cultivated precisely, they would bloom into four major cardinal virtues, okay, which are wisdom, justice, humanity, and courage. Of course, you have clumsy teachers and you have skillful teachers. And I absolutely agree with you, because I know Asian persons and Chinese persons who were taught by clumsy persons,
Right.
and they did not succeed to make those natural seeds bloom by traveling a normal and natural epistemological journey, but rather they felt obliged to fulfill certain family duties. And I absolutely agree with you, because I met not a lot, but many people who have been victims of clumsy teachers. But I can tell you that they are not only clumsy teachers, but they are skillful teachers that would be capable to guide, to accompany, to go with the student on the long journey, making the four natural seeds bloom into the cardinal virtues. And that would be something spontaneous, and that they would contribute to the family, to the state, and to the world, because they have the capacity, and because they would desire to do so, because they develop their natural epistemological capacities.
So, Juan, let me ask you one question. I really want to know. Okay, I only see the stupid Confucius teacher. I never see a smart one. Sounds like you have met one. So, who taught you Confucius?
Well, my grandfather is a skillful teacher.
Okay, good. You have a good grandfather. Because in school, usually the Confucius teacher, I will call stupid teacher. So they just
the clumsy one, exactly.
This is wonderful. I mean, I hope you
Yeah,
can
I
join
think
us
that
more often.
that's why I noticed your understanding is different than other people, because I have to go through a lot of process to have different understanding.
Yes, well, what my grandfather told me, because as all Chinese children, I learned by heart the Analects, okay, but it was not cramming. Okay, I learned by heart, but at the same time, he gave me the historical contextualization and explanations. Okay, so yes, there was an effort learned by heart, but it was not cramming, because it was combined with explanation and understanding. Okay, you need both.
And I mean, I hope you can join us more often, Juan. I really do. This has been quite a treat to have you join our group. It's been wonderful.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I will come back.
Please do. I humbly request that you do. Yeah, this has been a very interesting conversation here this evening. I mean, it opened it up, and I think really understanding culture and having the context really adds to the conversation here. So your contributions are very much appreciated, and as always, Jason, Ramon, and James, and Brian, everybody, Kevin. It was I had a lot of fun this evening. I really did. And I think that this was a really great session. So I'm just gonna announce our upcoming events really quickly, and we have some really interesting events coming up tomorrow. Actually, it's Comprehensivist Wednesdays, which is basically we're doing that in conjunction with the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. And we'll be following up on last week, which is we're doing improv. So it can be a little bit fun. If you're interested, go ahead and join us on Wednesday at 9 o'clock. And then there's Thursday night, where we're covering the Bhagavad Gita. Thursday and Friday. We're coming up on the end. We're in chapter 18 now. We're finishing. I think we have about, I don't want to say, but maybe 5 or 6 meetups left. Is it sound about right, Brian? I don't know, maybe roughly in that.
Yes, that sounds about right.
And then on Sunday at 11 a.m., this is a very, it's always a special treat when Yasuhiko Kimura will be joining us, along with Shrikant, and they'll be covering the psychology and cosmology of the Ubermensch. So that meetup is at 11 a.m. on Sunday. So I'm very, that's, if you're able to attend, it'd be very much worth your time. So those are the immediate upcoming events. Jason, you have an event this upcoming weekend as well, 7 p.m. It's not been posted yet, but it'll be posted shortly, for the Asian Philosophies group. Do you want to talk about
Yeah,
that?
we talk about Xuan Zhang,
Yeah.
the Buddhist that travel to India to
Okay.
get the sutra. Yeah, so a little bit background about the Tang Dynasty, the early Tang Dynasty, and Xuan Zhang during that background.
I really enjoy those meetups. I mean, and the work that you put in, and the work that you put in every week.
Every week.
I mean, every week, not only with the Asian philosophies, but with here. I really can't thank you enough. It's
my pleasure. I kind of like reorganize what I have learned, and put together. So
well, your willingness to share it it's an honor. So it's an honor to be able to attend this.
And as I always said, I always learn a lot from the group. Not only the person who know a lot, and also the person who the first time in contact, because either way I get new information. I'm able to look at things in different angles. So I thank you everyone to join.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, it's again, it is an honor to be here with you, and the work that you put in. It's an honor to see a lot of the the work that gets put into 52 Living Ideas, and then and your Asian philosophy meetup. Anyway, I appreciate everyone, and James, you'll be actually hosting on Friday.
I will not be hosting. I'll be speaking on Friday at the Existentialist Society in Melbourne. So it's 9 p.m. Pacific time, probably 2-ish Asian time.
I am gonna plan to attend that because you're speaking. So I'm gonna be quite tired. I have a wedding the next day.
Well, I've finally done some work. Yeah.
But I won't miss that.
James, what are you speaking on?
Religious logic.
Ooh.
So are you going to be talking about like St. Anselm or something along those lines?
No, it's not. I wanted to, I originally, I wanted to, I will be mentioning, and there's some quotations from some ancient philosophers, but there's not, no, I'm only going to be commenting on the development of religions.
Okay.
And not so much for the purposes of comparison, but to sort of make some statements about the kinds of logical ways that the religious patterns follow. So that I've worked out two stages and 2 stages of religions, and for basically the second stage, how there's 4 major movements of development of the for the advanced religions, for the second stage religions, like I don't have, I haven't reached all the possible conclusions, but I do have a kind of like a coherent presentation on the logical ways religions fall. The
Oh, it's gonna be
logical structures religions fall into.
It's gonna.
Sounds
It's
fascinating.
it is. It's gonna be a lot of fun. I think. I'm looking forward to it. You know, I usually make an effort to make the David Miller's meetups, but sometimes I just can't. Just yeah. But this one. I mean, this is a great topic. On top of the fact that you're presenting, I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Joseph.
So again, thank you everyone. I had a great time this evening. And I'll see, Kwan, I hope to see you next week, if
Yeah, sure.
possible. And then Kevin, take care. And then Brian, enjoy the rest of your vacation. Thank Penny for us, for reading,
Thank you.
as always.
I will.
All
Nice
right.
meeting you here, Kwan.
Thanks.
Ciao.
Take care.
Bye.